one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, June 9th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 23 degrees, 22 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. As a devastated community mourned the death of 4 members of a Muslim family in an apparent hate-motivated attack, we are learning more about the young man accused of intentionally hitting them with his truck, leaving a 9-year-old boy an orphan. Last night, thousands gathered outside the London, Ontario mosque where the murdered family worshipped to remember the victims and call for an end to Islamophobic hatred. There was also a vigil held in Ottawa. Jamie Pulfer now with the latest on the investigation into 20-year-old Nathaniel Veltman.
The RCMP is coordinating with local police on potential charges related to terrorism. So far, officials have not yet linked Veltman to any other suspects or known hate group as they continue to scour the internet. Facebook Canada confirms it removed what was believed to be Veltman's account shortly after the attack. The Globe and Mail reports Veltman bought the murder weapon, the truck used in this attack 3 weeks ago, a Dodge Ram armed with a collision bar on the front. Now, several witness reports suggest that Veltman was wearing a military helmet and a bulletproof vest when arrested. The Toronto Star reports one witness saw the suspect laughing as he was taken into police custody. That happened in a mall parking lot not far from the crime scene. We're also learning that he worked part-time at an egg farm in Strathroy near London, and that he's set to appear in a London court tomorrow. I'm Jamie Pulfer.
Now, there was a vigil last night in Ottawa for victims of that attack. It was held at the same time as one in the city where the attack happened, and that was London. 5 members of the Muslim family run down on Sunday when they were just out for a walk. It's only 9-year-old Fayez Salman who survived. Flags are flying at half-mast at Ontario government, federal, and municipal buildings this morning. City News Time 9:02. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Still quite warm for Ottawa, the Valley, and Smiths Falls today, but becoming less humid with more of a north wind, sun and cloud, the high 29 degrees. Tonight, mainly clear, cooler, low near 13, but 13 is the average low. And tomorrow, sun and cloud, 25. For today, the high, 29.
And right now in Ottawa, 23 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's 22. Renfrew County District Health Unit Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Robert Cushman, says 65% of residents in that region have received at least 1 dose of vaccine. But he tells City News the province making changes to the rollout is affecting the progress locally.
No, it's a mess because the province keeps changing things. They announced this week that you could have shortened intervals. So what we've done is we only schedule out 2 weeks at a time.
Now, the doctor is also asking people who received AstraZeneca for their first shot to not try and seek a second dose just yet, since eligibility for those in the region still isn't until mid-July, potentially. Dr. Cushman is advising residents to be cautious when restrictions lift on Friday and suggests a backyard gathering over rushing out to a patio. City News Time 9:03. The Ottawa Red Blacks launching an internal investigation into one of their own. Accusations have been made on social media concerning the player. Social media posts are accusing one player of a homophobic assault in Toronto over the weekend. Now, no details have been confirmed yet by either police or Red Blacks officials. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Say X,
he's got the Y.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
I did not win the Lotto, Max. You can tell because I'm here. I did not win the Lotto, Max. But I have a good feeling about Friday's draw. I'm feeling very confident about Friday. I'll let you know on Monday how it all turned out. Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. Thanks for spending part of your morning with us. We have a very busy show ahead, covering the news, reacting to the news, debating and discussing the news. It's kind of what we do around here. We have a city council meeting this morning. Starts at 10 o'clock. So at that hour, our friends at Rogers Television will leave the Rob Snow Show, and they'll broadcast the City Council meeting, as they always do, in its entirety. Very busy agenda today. We have reporters covering it, and we'll get some reaction to it from Sue Schering when she joins us a little later in the program. Longtime City Hall columnist for the Ottawa Sun, reader weekly in the Sun these days. I noticed on the agenda, going through the agenda this morning, it's a small item. But think about it bigger picture, because we've just come through this big debate about the tax break for the new Porsche dealership in Vanier. And I said at the time, to me, this whole thing is not really about luxury sports cars, whether they're selling Porsches or whether they're selling Ladas. To me, it makes no difference. To me, it's about whether the city needs to offer these sorts of economic development incentives at all in Ottawa. Why are we demonizing a long-time good local business, member of the business community? Why are we dragging its good name through the mud? When, to me, the real issue through all of that was, do we really need the city to be offering these kinds of grants at all? Forget that it's Porsches, okay? At all. And I would highlight this little item that's on the City Council meeting's agenda today. The numbers are a little smaller, but to me, it's still a lot of money. I mean, it's not Lotto Max money, but $500,000, right? That's a tidy sum, okay? $500,000. If I cut you a check for $500,000, you'd be a pretty happy person, I would think. And it's going to sail through the council because these sorts of grants are on every city council agenda meeting. I doubt your city councilor has even given it 2 seconds worth of thought. Okay? In this particular case, this is an item on the agenda today. We're talking about a very extensive development. And I'm not anti-developer, okay? A lot of the city councilors think developers are bad people. I'm not one of those people. But here we are talking about a mixed-use development right in the heart of trendy Westboro, okay? Home of the Subaru and the Thule roof rack. Trendy Westboro, okay? Scott Street, Churchill. Very nice part of town. Not far from the Westboro LRT station. You are living the downtown green, sustainable life. It's yours, okay? So the city staff says this development has a construction value alone of $60 million. Whatever they're going to build there. The materials, the salaries, the wages paid to the construction workers, $60 million, this development. And the developer, once it's all built up, which it will be by the year 2023, they're going to pay about $1.3 million a year in property tax. Okay? Mixed-use development, big one. Right in one of the most affluent parts of Ottawa. So I would ask you, does it really need a $500,000 grant? Basically, tax break from the city of Ottawa. It's just shy of $500,000. Do you think a $60 million development doesn't go ahead because the city doesn't offer $500,000 in incentives in Westboro? Less than a kilometer away from an LRT station? 15 minutes away from the Peace Tower? Are you kidding me? See, you want to review something at the city? Have a good look at that program. It's called the Brownfields program. Because I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, that's where the big money is. We're going to get into the federal political scene this morning. There's so much to talk about. Every Wednesday, this is the place to score your political fix. And we have a pair of great political analysts on the program today. Susan Smith is a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, okay? But she's welcome here anytime. She is with Bluesky. Kate Harrison is more on the right side of things, and she's with Summa Strategies. They're both coming up right after the 9:30 news. We have a lot to discuss this morning. When is the election, right? Everybody wants to know. When is the election? When is the election? The good money is on mid-September Mid-September. That's what a lot of people are thinking. After Labor Day, children back in school, and more shots. More second shots, more importantly. Okay? Because that's where Canada's the real laggard. You know, the number of Canadians with first doses, much improved. The Globe and Mail editorial today describes Canada's vaccination program as gold medal winning. Gold medal winning when it comes to first doses. Okay, gold medal winning. Well, I would say we're also rans when it comes to getting second doses. Okay, we're not anywhere near the podium. We are not owning the podium when it comes to second doses. It's less than 8% of the population is fully vaccinated. Isn't that the goal, to be fully vaccinated? The vaccination program's been running in Canada for 6 months now, about 6 months now. December 14th, first doses went into the first arms. Big photo ops all around. But if that number improves, second doses, and the economy is more or less open again, and life looks more like whatever normal is going to be, well, then the good money, the political watchers say, the good money is on Justin Trudeau calling an election. Okay, but we'll find out what our experts think this morning. And we're also going to talk about Quebec politics. Gosh, there's such a sorry lack of leadership in Ottawa right now. Not just Mr. Trudeau, but all of them. They're so weak-kneed when it comes to what's been going on in Quebec. But we're going to talk about Quebec, the race in Quebec. There are no Federalists in Ottawa anymore. It's embarrassing. They're all kind of embarrassing themselves, if you ask me, the way they're trolling for votes in Quebec. The fact is, there is no leader in Ottawa today who is willing to say to Quebec, to the Premier of Quebec, to voters in Quebec, enough. Enough already. There's an election coming. Quebec might decide the outcome of the election, could certainly decide whether it's a majority government or a minority government. So for that reason, and this goes for Mr. Trudeau, Mr. O'Toole, and Mr. Singh, when it comes to things like Bill 96, the new language law, and the very gall of seeing Quebec unilaterally amend the Canadian Constitution, but also Bill 21, which is really the focus for me this morning, Bill 21, which is basically, in my own opinion, legislated racism. The non-Quebecois are on their own. They have nobody in Ottawa. They have no champion in Ottawa. No one will speak up for them. And that's a shame. And it's something I want to get into with you today during the Talkback Hour. You know, we have had this terrible incident in London, Ontario, this atrocity, mass murder, terror attack. And I listened to our federal leaders yesterday. We aired what they said during our program yesterday in the House of Commons, in Parliament. Mr. Trudeau, Mr. O'Toole, Mr. Singh. They're saying all the right things about what happened in London, Ontario. We must fight against hate. Yes, we must. We must denounce racism. Yes, we must. We must denounce bigotry in all its forms. Yes, we must. Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, homophobia, you name it, okay? All well and good. But then, where do they go on the Quebec question? It's a point made by columnists in both the Star and the Sun today, Delacourt in the Star, Lily in the Sun. And I mean, let's face it, those two papers, those two people, they rarely have the same view on anything. Singing from the same hymn book today, read them today. Whatever those political leaders said yesterday, their voices fall silent when it comes to Quebec. And that's what's been happening with Bill 21. Bill 21 is state-sanctioned racism. It is legislated racism. It's dressed up as a defense for the secular culture of Quebec post-Quiet Revolution. But what does it really say? It says there are Quebecers, okay? The real Quebecers, the Pure Laine, okay? The secular Francophone Quebecers. And then there are all you other people who come from all those other places, and you still worship a higher power. And you know what? That's not the Quebec way. We don't do that here. We don't tolerate that here. In fact, you can't do that here and be a full participant in Quebec society. It's against the law. It's against the law. It's against the law. Bill 21, notwithstanding the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's abhorrent. It's deplorable. It's shameful that this kind of legislation can exist in Canada in the year 2021. And it is embarrassing. You should all be embarrassed. If you are listening in a political leader's office right now, you should be embarrassed that your leader does not have the guts to speak up about this. It's embarrassing that there are no politicians in Ottawa, save who? Jody Wilson-Raybould, maybe? Maybe? Who will stand up and say, what you're doing in Quebec is wrong. Instead, what do you get? What do you get? Well, say Quebec. Okay? It's just Quebec. That's the way they do things there. They have their own culture. They're special, distinct, you might say. Can you really say and mean it? You're opposed to racism. You'll fight Islamophobia. You'll fight anti-Semitism. You'll fight religious persecution of any kind. Can you really say it and mean it? You'll stand up for human rights. You'll go to the mat for minority rights. If you're not willing to go to bat for people affected by a piece of legislation like Bill 21, I don't think so. Call me crazy. I don't want any government of any political stripe, of any persuasion, to be able to say what I can wear and what I can't wear. I don't think the government should have the power to question the validity of anyone's religious beliefs. I thought that's why we had a Charter of Rights, to protect people from such abuses of the state. But, notwithstanding, you try to find a political leader who will mutter anything close to what I have said this morning. It's like trying to find buried treasure on Oak Island. We're going to get into that during the Talkback Hour. We do it every morning between 10 and 11. Debate the hot issues making the news. 750-1310 is our call-in line. It's always a great hour of opinion, even the odd argument. In fact, a lot of the arguments on this show are just odd. As well, the latest from up the line, Bruce McIntyre, Valley View. He's with the Eganville Leader, and there's a fire ban in the city. We're going to talk about that next. It's dry, and it's smoking hot on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
There is a fire ban in the city of Ottawa. Very, very dry out there. How dry? Last month, for the entire month of May, I looked this up, Environment Canada, my source. We had 13.5 millimeters of rain for the entire month of May. So, I mean, bone dry. If you compare it to May from the year before, May 2020, we had 44 millimeters of rain. And then May of 2019, which was a year of terrible flooding, you may recall, we had 90 millimeters of rain. So it's bone dry. Bone dry. So far this month, we've had 16 millimeters of rain, but most of that came in one day, which was last Thursday. So no fires. And joining us from the Ottawa Fire Service is Public Information Officer Carson Tharris. Good morning.
Morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm okay. Trying to stay cool, and hydrated. So tell us more about the fire ban. What does it entail?
Yeah, so when we have these hot, dry conditions, our teams are constantly monitoring conditions out throughout the city, and what we're seeing right now is a lot of dead, dry vegetation, especially in the rural areas of our city. So when we kind of have ditches and areas around the city with longer grasses, all of that provides a lot of fuel that can lead to rapid fire spread. And then even in the more developed area where we do have shrubs and grass and other things, we do have this risk of fire spreading a lot more quickly when we have these hot, dry conditions that we've seen the last couple of weeks. Additionally, the other piece that we look at is the heat and humidity. For our fire crews, when they are called to respond to an out-of-control grass fire, it's extremely physical exertion to battle those fires. Yeah. So when we have these heat waves come through with a lot of heat and humidity, we start to get concerned about heat stroke and heat exhaustion for our fire crews if they were called to respond to a grass fire. So that's why the ban has been put in place at this time.
Yeah, it's very physically taxing. I've talked to some Ottawa firefighters over the years, and I've asked them what it's like to try and fight a fire in this kind of heat. And they said it's like wearing a snowsuit in a sauna is what it's like. So if you think about that, that's what they're dealing with. And it doesn't take much. I mean, a good gust of wind and the fire is up and on its way, right, Carson?
Yeah, so we have already this spring we've responded to a number of out-of-control fires. Some of those do start from people having what they would consider to be a small backyard campfire. So we're just burning a couple of branches and things from trying to clean up the yard. Yep. And quickly that can spread out of control, turn into a large grass fire. Last week we had one that spread to the deck of a neighboring home. So these things can get out of control really quickly. So that's why when conditions are dry like this, we're asking everyone to not have any of those fires and to instead if you do need to clear some brush, you can take advantage of the weekly yard waste collection that the city will do with your garbage collection to put those branches out to get collected that way.
Okay. What if people have a permit?
Yeah, so once the ban is lifted, hopefully once we get some more rain and conditions improve a little bit and we're able to lift the ban, then you would require a permit to be able to have any kind of outdoor fire. Right. But the permit doesn't exempt you from the fire ban. Okay. The other issue that we do see a lot, especially along roadways, is discarded cigarettes, lighting grass fires in our ditches and things. So somebody can just be driving along and throw a cigarette out the window of a car, or hiking along on a hiking path and throw a cigarette on the trail. And those cigarettes can smolder for several hours and then light the ditch and the grass on fire when no one's in the area. So if people are smoking, we really want to ask everyone to make sure that those cigarettes are disposed of properly in an ashtray or a deep tin can.
Okay. What about there are all sorts of outdoor devices now to kind of give you the campfire feel or the fireplace feel. What about those types of outdoor devices?
Yeah, so there's lots of outdoor wood-burning fireplaces, and to use those, you would require a burn permit, and those would be restricted with this burn ban. So,
but I'm thinking about the ones that use a little propane. The ones that use like propane or gas or what have you.
So those are a great alternative, and those are you're allowed to use those still during the ban, and those are also allowed in the kind of denser urban areas of the city where a burn permit wouldn't be allowed. So the important thing, if you are using those devices, is really to look at the manufacturer's recommendation, because they're all going to have different specifications about the clearances to your home, the clearances to surrounding vegetation. So making sure that you're carefully reading those devices to understand exactly how to safely operate them.
Okay. Look, I thank you so much for your time this morning, Carson Tharris. Best to all our firefighters.
Okay.
Thanks again.
The other thing we want to get out this week is just asking everyone to test their smoke alarms. So this is our smoke alarm campaign. So asking everyone when they do get home today to test those smoke alarms.
Thank you again. Public Information Officer for the Ottawa Fire Service, Carson Tharris. The news coming up, and then it's your political fix on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, June 9th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 24 degrees. And here's what's making news this hour. We're learning more about one of the bystanders who came to the aid of the 5 family members struck by a car Sunday night in London, Ontario. Nurse practitioner Miranda Campbell says people were screaming and crying on their phones, but few were helping the victims at the point she arrived. Campbell says she got out of her car and performed chest compressions on the 74-year-old woman who would later be pronounced dead at the scene. She says the woman's clothing was torn by the attack. She covered her up to give her one final piece of dignity. Campbell says she cannot stop thinking about the boy who was badly injured and crying as he lay on the ground. 9-year-old Fayez Salman was told last night the rest of his immediate family was killed. The man facing 4 counts of first-degree murder in this incident, 20-year-old Nathaniel Veltman, is scheduled to appear in court in London tomorrow. The hotel requirement expected to be dropped, according to reports. The federal government easing that restriction for anyone fully vaccinated as part of the loosening of border restrictions, which apparently is about to be announced. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's time to score. Your political fix. With Susan Smith, a principal with Bluesky Strategy Group. Welcome back, Sue.
Good morning, Rob.
Good to hear you. And Kate Harrison is Vice Chair, Summa Strategies. Good morning, Kate.
Good morning to you both. How are you?
I think we're both well. I won't speak on behalf of Susan, but
very well, thank you.
Good. Everyone's cool, right? Everyone's staying cool. That's good. Okay.
Right.
Susan, when is the election?
Oh, well, I'll polish off my crystal ball, Rob, and as I smooth it over, I'm guessing fall 2021.
Okay.
I think we've said all along, or I've said all along that, and a lot of people think that when the vaccination and the pandemic management situation starts to turn around, and when the country starts to open up, and when people can be in stores and in restaurants, and children can be in schools, that's when the election will happen. So I think it will be this fall. September, October is my guess.
September, October. Okay. Post-Labor Day. Day, right? Post-Labor Day. Okay. Kate Harrison, when is the election?
Well, I thought it was a month ago, so I'm not sure I'm the best person.
I thought it was in April, so Kate and I have been saying, there's going to be an election. It's coming soon. It's coming soon. And, so.
Clearly, I need to borrow Susan's crystal ball. I mean, it feels as though things are underway and preparations are underway for this fall. There's just a few kind of logistical, nerdy things that the House of Commons is doing to try and kind of set the stage for that. Of course, you've got the bill for how elections will be run. You've got members of Parliament making their farewell speeches sometime next week. Those things really only tend to happen if there's an election on the horizon. That being said, I'm not sure that any of the opposition parties are itching to go to the polls. You know, you take a look at public opinion polling. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a bit, but it's not as though there's a breakaway for the Conservatives or the NDP. So the Liberals have a bit of an opportunity here to continue to govern effectively as a majority, even though they're in a minority parliament. They've managed to make it work so far. I'm not sure that the numbers are strong enough for Trudeau to necessarily pull off a majority. You'd think he'd want to be very, very certain of that before trying to push an election forward. So I'm not sure that an election is really that, not just necessary, but that it would net Trudeau the gains that he needs to pull off a majority win.
Oh, really? Okay. But under your scenario, Kate, you would see it be Mr. Trudeau triggering the election. Right. Not that he would be defeated on a confidence vote or anything like that. Right?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like that's in the cards. And I think if there is an election, it would be by the Liberals' own hand to orchestrate.
Right. Okay.
I agree with Kate on that, Rob. The other thing, there's a couple other factors at play from a timing perspective. There are a number of provincial and municipal elections next year, so the government would have to bob and weave around those. And typically the feds don't like to overlap too much, especially with provincial elections. Municipal are another different story. And there's the other thing of MP pensions. October 25th I think it's October 25th, the day that the class of 2015 would qualify for their pensions, should they still be in office.
Yeah, that's true.
So watch that date. I doubt you will see us going to the polls before that date.
You think that's a factor, Kate, the whole pension thing? The 6-year pension?
For sure. No one wants to talk about it, but it definitely is.
Yeah? Okay.
I think that it's an incentive for folks to stick around, though if they haven't made their intentions clear by now, if they're going to be standing in the next election, they're going to have to do that pretty soon. We might see a swath. If we start seeing a swath of announcements over the summer, while I'm not going to run again in the next election, usually that's a pretty good sign that we're going to have an election sooner rather than later.
Okay, let's talk. Kate, you mentioned the polls. The polls are for dogs. Here are some of the polls in May. Angus Reid, 34-32. Main Street, 37-31. Leger, 34-30. Ecos, 35-28. Abacus Data, 34-31. But let me ask you, do those top line numbers really mean anything? The national
Generally,
numbers?
No. Yeah, I say no. I think it's very misleading to look at national numbers and try and take away from that the real state of the race. You really have to dig into the regional polling. The gaps in Ontario and Quebec in particular are the ones to watch. BC is actually pretty interesting. In some polls, have had the Liberals all the way in third in BC, which is not bode well for them. But the Liberals are doing very well, in some cases, a double-digit lead in the province of Ontario. So I think the national numbers are a little bit inflated for the opposition, frankly, because of overwhelming support in Western Canada. But if you really want to look at the 20 to 30 seats that Trudeau would need to swing in order to pull off a majority, you really have to dig into those regional numbers.
I mean, because to me, whether you say, because the theme in the last couple of polls has been, well, it's narrowing, the race is narrowing. But then when you dig in a little bit more and you see, say, a double-digit lead for the Liberals in Ontario, and you see they're up, whatever they're up by in Quebec over the block, say 8-9 points around there. Mm-hmm. To me, Sue, that means it's not close at all, really, in my mind.
Well, I mean, and it's a fluctuating situation, but Kate's right. The regional dig down is important. I think, and these are the numbers, obviously, that the parties are going to be looking at, and they look at them almost on a riding-by-riding level, even closer than just the provincial level. But yes, Quebec is looking strong, and that matters for any government or any party that's looking to reach a majority. Ontario, again, is critical and strong for the Liberals. Atlantic Canada remains strong. The middle of the country, Liberals don't take seats in Alberta, though Jason Kenney's in trouble, and it could mean some split votes, which could be a challenge for the Conservatives. And BC, Kate is right. It's always very interesting with Conservatives, NDP, and Liberals there. So the regional votes are what matter. It isn't close in some of those areas, but time has a way of playing with these things.
I don't know, Kate. I'm thinking, if you're more on the right side of things, watching election night, results coming in from Atlantic Canada, and then Quebec, and then Ontario, I think it could be a pretty bleak look.
Well, the one thing the top line numbers don't, I know we don't need a rehash of 2015.
No.
Bad memories. But in any event, the one thing that the vote intention doesn't actually account for is motivation. And I think that really is a bit of an unknown at this stage. As we've talked about many times, incumbent governments have benefited from popular support during the pandemic, by and large. Very few exceptions to that. So people are feeling okay about the Liberals. Are they feeling motivated enough to come out and vote, potentially in a pandemic-style election that looks very different than elections we've had before? I'm not sure that if the ballot question is running on COVID management and the management of the pandemic, I'm not sure that that's going to be enough to pull out those middle voters who might just be feeling not particularly motivated to come out and vote at all. So that's a bit of the unknown right now. Sure, the Liberals benefit from kind of that latent support. Is it enough to push them to a majority? Are people really excited to come out? I'm not getting that sense right now.
Okay.
Well, it's voter motivation does matter. I do think we are not so far away, and yes, we've had one election since 2016, since what happened 2016 in the States. But I do think voter motivation in general will be high because you get what you vote for, or you get who you don't vote for. And I think memories are still fresh in this country about what happens when you don't. And so if Canadians want a certain kind of government I think they'll get out, they'll leave their houses and do it. There are also going to be modifications to how they can vote. 3 days, mail in, all of those things will make it much more, give people much more confidence and comfort in the way they cast their ballot.
I also wonder if the ballot question is going to be pandemic response or pandemic management, or whether, if it's in the fall, or especially if it's later, even much later. Maybe it goes the full distance, not till October 2023. Then it, the pandemic is a thing of the past, and it's okay. That's over. What are you going to do for me now, or where are we going from here? I wonder what the actual ballot question is going to be.
Well, Rob, I don't think we're going to go till 2023. Respectfully, I don't think we'll wait that long. I think pandemic management will be part of it. At least the Liberals will be pushing to that because they're the ones that did manage the pandemic. And they're the ones that helped families and made sure they kept their rents and their mortgages with CERB and other things. I mean, it wasn't perfect, there's no question, but the government stepped up and stepped in as they were supposed to do. That's what people need their governments to do. The other part of the question is economic recovery. And are we going to start to see the signs and glimmers of that? I mean, it was a big spending budget, which will cause lots of people in Kate's world, and a lot of people in my world, quite frankly, a bit of consternation about how much money is being spent in terms of the economic recovery part of things. But we have to kickstart this country. We have to get infrastructure built. We need to get people back working. We need to get women back in the workplace with childcare and things like that. So that'll be the other part of the question. I think it'll be 1A and 1B.
Right. Okay. Just before we start, I want to talk a little bit about Quebec when we come back after the break. You have that ad, David. I just heard this ad. I think this is a new attack ad from Doug Ford against Justin Trudeau. I haven't heard this one before.
Is that what's happening?
I haven't heard this one before. Play that again, please.
Ontario, we've all been working hard to keep each other safe this past year, and it hasn't been easy. But while you've been staying home and following the rules, Trudeau's government exempted 1 in 3 air travelers entering Canada from the quarantine rules the rest of us have to follow, and they won't say why. Now, over 90% of cases are new, more deadly variants. Nobody wants a 4th wave. It's time to act. Authorized by the CFO for the Ontario PC Party.
The Ontario PC Party. Gosh, Corey Tenike is there, and it's so reminiscent of a Harper attack ad, isn't it? It really is. It really is. I think it's even the same voice. It might even be the same voice. I think it's the same voice. By the way, that hotel quarantine thing, I think they're doing an announcement today to announce the end of that. So,
thank goodness.
All right. So Mr. Trudeau will not have to go to the quarantine hotel when he comes back from the G7. When we come back, we'll talk about Quebec politics, Indigenous issues, and a Green Party that seems to have just lost its way. This is your political fix on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News. 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
Your Political Fix Part 2 with Susan Smith from Bluesky, Kate Harrison from Summa. Susan, how important do you think the race in Quebec will be at determining the final outcome of the next federal election?
I think it always plays a very key factor. It's a big province with a lot of seats. And when it splinters up between many parties, it's difficult for a government, for the Liberals or the Conservatives to form a majority when you have, when the Bloc has a resurgence and so on. So when you see Quebec go towards the NDP, the Liberals or the Conservatives with more seats, as they did in particular in 2015, that's when you see a majority government. So it really does matter how Quebecers vote and how they're feeling about Canada at the time of an election.
Okay. To me, it could be the key to the whole thing, especially when it comes to deciding minority or majority government, what the race in Quebec. And I think that's why we hear this almost nationalist sentiment coming from Prime Minister Trudeau sometimes. What do you think, Kate?
Yeah, well, there was a school of thought back in the spring that one of the reasons why the Liberals didn't pull the plug a few months ago was because the Bloc was outperforming them in Quebec. And I tend to agree with you. If we're looking at where there's going to be splits and what the right cocktail needs to be to actually pull the plug and test the confidence of the government, the polls really have to be favoring the Liberals in a big way for them to do it. I would say it's even more important than Ontario in terms of trying to crack that majority. I do think that a lot of the pandering from all parties, not just the Liberals, but to Quebec, particularly when we're talking about Bill 21, is quite disturbing. My view, that is effectively kind of legislated racism in the province. And when we're having what feels like a national conversation in a moment around Islamophobia, to not call out that bill for what it is, to me just underscores how kind of crassly political things can be when we're talking about electoral success in Quebec, and all parties are guilty of it. And it's really quite a shame that no one seems to be willing to call it out for what it is.
There's no federal leadership on Bill 21 or even now Bill 96. It's like, well, that's just Quebec, and Quebec can do what Quebec will do.
If Alberta were trying to pull a similar maneuver, people would lose their minds.
Yeah.
And there would not be the shoulder shrug that there is given about Quebec.
Do you think there's a lack of federal leadership when it comes to even being critical of these bills, these laws in Quebec right now because of the electoral climate right now, Susan?
I think it's unfair to say that there's a lack of federal leadership. Certainly on Bill 21, the Trudeau stood up against it, but their point was to have it first go through the court system itself, and because it was being challenged by Quebecers in Quebec. And the Supreme Court has ruled that some of it is valid and some of it isn't valid in terms of the application. But I actually agree with Kate on the legislative racism nature of it. I mean, it's unacceptable, especially, it's unacceptable at any time. It becomes even more stark in the wake of the tragedy in London with that family. Our federal government, regardless of who's in, whether it was Prime Minister Harper before or Prime Minister Trudeau now, has always stood up for the country and Canada first. We have a strong constitution. You cannot amend it willy-nilly. There's amending formula. No,
someone's gonna try.
Well, they're gonna try, but you can't. So there are, and that's where the posturing is coming from. Is actually Quebec and less so Canada. So I don't know if, from a political perspective on the federal level, I would let Quebec bash its head against a wall on trying to amend a constitution that they can't because of the way the amending formula is before you start bashing your own head against the wall. Like, don't get in front of somebody who's doing something to themselves.
Okay.
But it will be a challenge for people, and it's disappointing.
Indigenous issues have been thrust back into the spotlight because of the terrible news out of Kamloops. The Trudeau government promised a better relationship. Of Crown First Nations relationship when it came to power in 2015. In your opinions, Susan, what have been some of the successes and some of the shortcomings?
First of all, the Kamloops discovery of 215 children in unmarked graves it's a gut punch. Of course, for First Nations communities around the country who've been saying that this has been the case, and we should have been listening to them. And former National Chief Phil Fontaine was saying, "You should have listened to us. We told you this." And I think it's been a gut punch and a wake-up call, hopefully, for the rest of us. The Trudeau government has been doing its best to start on a course correction for over 150 years of wrongs that have taken place. Nothing was going to be fixed overnight. So as recently as the last budget, $18 billion being invested to help close some of the gaps in the communities because they've been so underfunded. There has been some progress, but not a success on the boil water advisories. They still exist, but over 100 have been mitigated. There's early child care development. There's been investments in schools and community infrastructure and housing. And most importantly, there's been a commitment and I think movement on First Nations-led solutions to things. Like, gone are the days where Ottawa says, this is the way it's going to be and this is how it's going to get done. It's sitting down with these communities and figuring out what it is how they want things to be implemented. And that's an important part of reconciliation.
More consultative.
I think so.
Right.
And I think that's important, but that takes time.
Right.
And that causes frustration.
Okay. What do you think, Kate?
Well, the boil water advisory timeline has been pushed outward, and to me that is a major, major gap because so much stems from just quality of life on reserve in terms of improving the prospects for Indigenous peoples. One thing that I think the government did get right was actually the vaccine rollout in Indigenous communities. They were prioritized. The community had a direct role in how that all was administered, and I think that was very important. A lot of the tone is set from chiefs and leaders, and they were quick to adopt the importance of vaccines and try to work to reduce hesitancy. So we actually have a pretty good outlook on how Indigenous reserves are COVID protected. When we're talking, though, about instituting recommendations made from the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Inquiry or the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, there's a lot of big, ambitious policies in there that need to be we need to start kind of moving towards implementing. It does take time, to Susan's point, but it feels that if we're looking at this file on the whole, there's not a ton of tangible successes at this stage that the Liberals are able to point to.
Okay. I've been quite impressed with Annamie Paul when I've interviewed her. Really, the only leader that I've ever known for the Green Party of Canada has been Elizabeth May. She's very engaging. Didn't know what to expect from Annamie Paul. Find her quite engaging as well, but I find the party's in turmoil. That's the only ever news that comes out of the Green Party. And I think Annamie Paul has made a terrible decision in where she's going to run in the elections. Toronto Centre, right? She's going to run. I think she's going to get crushed. I don't even think it's going to be close. If there's an election this fall, what are you expecting from the Greens, Kate?
Well, if they were smart, they would really focus on, 10 to 15 ridings where they could have a considerable shot at success. I agree. The by-election choice, I suppose, is a morally honest one in the sense that that's where she lives, and she's not riding shopping to try and get in the House. Yeah. But when you are trying to get out from under the shadow of Elizabeth May, which is a major challenge for the Greens, frankly, because Elizabeth May refuses to go away, that becomes a little bit more important, like that day-to-day.
And the last time I interviewed Elizabeth May, it's like, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. She told me she wants to be the Speaker of the House.
Selfish. I think she's very, very selfish. I think she's not doing anything to improve the prospects of their party nationally. It's always been all about Elizabeth May. And it's really a shame for somebody like Annamie Paul to try and take that over. So I think the best that they can hope for is to do some really targeted campaigns, really avoid running a national campaign where you're going to get crushed. They probably don't have the funds to do it anyway.
All right. Sue, what do you think?
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV.